Hey everybody, I have a special guest today. Steve's going to show you how we do our garden.
So yes, this is a raised bed. This is a self-watering raised bed, otherwise known as a wicking bed. And we're going to show you how we built these. The underlying concept of this is you want the water to wick up into the soil. Put in the water down a 2-inch PVC pipe, or I can put in a large diameter pipe and basically use it to also dump large buckets of water in, and also drop a hose in there. Okay, we have several raised garden beds, wicking beds, self-watering beds in various stages of production. This one has actually plants growing in it. The idea is you're basically building a raised bed, which is very traditional. But in this case, you're actually lining this with a pond liner. And on the raised bed, I mean, basically you're just building your typical raised bed. We got stake pockets on the inside. That way you're not kicking them from the outside when you're harvesting. Put a 45-degree angle on the board so that they're not cutting into the pond liner. And then you're using roofing caps, redheads in this case, to basically hold the pond liner in place. And you don't want to have a whole lot of pond liner hanging over, because basically you'll have wasps and things like that making nests underneath there. And so you just want to tack it down. And so what you're doing is you're protecting the soil from the wood, and you're not getting any kind of treatments that they use on the wood that's going to get sucked up in your soil and your plants. This is a 4-foot by 10-foot bed right here. And then basically you have it lined, and then you put in perforated pipe. 4-inch perforated pipe works really well. So the perforated pipe is basically supporting the soil that you're going to put on top of it. And the pipe is basically going to be a reservoir. You keep the bed from overflowing by basically drilling a hole through the side and going into the pond liner. This is a 3/8-inch vinyl tubing. So you're going to drill a 1/2-inch hole. You're going to push the vinyl tubing through. When it hits the pond liner, you'll make a little X on the liner with a razor knife, pocket knife, whatever, and then just push the vinyl tubing through there, and now you have a nice tight fit. So what that means is these beds are never going to overflow. They're never going to flood each other, but they'll always have water to water themselves. There's a couple of different ways to do this interior pipe. You can basically cut it off at length, and basically be careful when you put it in, because you can have razor sharp edges on the edge of the perforated pipe that could cut into your plastic line, your pond liner. So you can cut them to length. You can cut them short, and you basically use a landscape fabric to cover up the ends so that no soil is going to go down in the ends of the pipe. And then you're going to want to start putting in your overflow tubes and such, and your fill tubes. So this is a 2-inch PVC pipe, and what we've done is we've cut a 45-degree angle on the end, kind of dulled off this end a little bit too. So what it means is when this is sitting on the bottom, basically the water is going to flow freely in, because if it was set at a 90-degree angle, then basically it's going to be butted up against the liner, and it's going to fill up with water, and it's not going to drain freely. So you either want to put this in, a couple of different ways of doing it is basically you can set it off, cut the pipe short, stick it in through there, and then basically you're going to stick some filter fabric right there so that it holds it in place and not has any soil going down in the end. And then you can basically use that as a depth gauge and also as a fill tube for putting in your water. And the wicking part is basically wherever that water level is, as far as the water table, the water is going to wick up into that soil matrix about 9 inches. So you want to have basically somewhere between 12 to 14 inches worth of soil over top of your pipe, and then that way you don't have a saturated soil on top. The benefits of this bed are awesome. It saves water, it conserves water. I work during the day and I'm on the road at night, so I don't have a chance to tend and water the garden on a regular basis. So basically these plants are able to water themselves. All I have to do is just recharge the reservoir on the weekends. So on this end, this perforated pipe right here is basically the drain tube is on the inside. Okay, see it? And so there's the drain tube. And so basically when this thing fills up and has too much water in it, it's basically going to overflow clean water on this tube right here. And then that'll also show you, oh, it's full of water too. So what we've got here is just 2 layers of pipe, and basically the second layer is sitting in the radiuses of the first layer, which gives you what we call a close pack, which allows these things to pack in nice and tight. And then what you're going to do is backfill this with peat moss initially, because peat moss, water just wicks up in peat moss just very readily. And so these little openings that you have right here is where the peat moss is going to interface with the water, okay? And that's what's going to be able to wick it up, okay? And you don't want to have an extensive area for that water to wick up. It's just not necessary. Just these small gaps in here in the close pack system will basically allow for that water to wick up. And then I'm just using large boards to basically hold everything down in place to make everything semi-level. And then I'll backfill this with peat moss. And as the peat moss is holding it down, then I'll remove these boards, move them down, and just repeat the process. Okay, so we put some mineral soil in there to hold those pipes into place because it's a heavier soil than peat moss. And don't say that that's dirt, because dirt is what you find in your belly button. This is soil. And then this is the peat moss that we're going to use for the wicking ability. So we're just going to open that up, spread that out. And then just remove your board at the very end and keep this soil from going down in the end pipes, and you're good to go. Right here is it's a direct conduit laying on top of these 4.5-inch perforated pipes. So it'll swallow a lot of water at a time. You can also put water down the 2-inch PVC pipe. You can also use it as a depth gauge if you want to put in a yardstick to measure the height of the water, or if you want to put in a, we also use tubes. Basically, this is a flotation, this is a dipstick essentially. So that's a 2-inch foam core, solid form core. And this is an aluminum filler rod used in welding systems. And so it's a lightweight rod, and it's pushed down in there. And so basically when this rod is at the top of that PVC pipe, then basically it's full of water. You want to backfill this with whatever soil that you have on hand. Mostly a friable soil, mostly organic matter. A friable soil is going to be like this peat moss consistency, all right, where it just basically it falls, you know, through your fingers and that kind of thing. Versus this is a mineral soil, okay? This is way too heavy. So chopping this kind of stuff up and making it smaller particles and then blend it in with some organic matter like leaf litter, compost, that kind of thing, to make a more friable soil is what you want to have in these wicking beds. So mineral soil, organic matter. And so you want a blend of these two. And then you want to water this from the top down, okay? And to basically get everything to subside. You had this all the way up to the top, it'll move basically about 1.5 inches once you get it wet and it subsides. And so then you'll get some really good root contact and get rid of a lot of air voids. Another thing you want to think about is that we have 3 beds right here, and I can drop a hose out to this location right here, and I can water 3 beds without moving a whole lot, without dragging hoses around beds and things like that. So that's something to think about. Also, on the drain hose that's coming out, it's off-centered. What that allows me to do is to sink a trellis in here, okay? And so now I got a multi-use here where I can basically have a trellis, and that doesn't interfere with how I fill and how I overflow, okay? Which means also that these fill tubes need to be correspondingly located in the right location so that it's not being blocked by the trellis. And then this is a coffee cup that's basically used to cover up this 2-inch PVC pipe, okay? Because that's a direct access to water, so that's a mosquito breeding ground. Same thing with this 6-inch double-walled ADS pipe. That's also direct access to water. So we're basically using a 6-inch clay pot or an 8-inch clay pot. And this basically has several purposes. Again, it's a rock washer. So what I've done is in the very bottom of this, I've made basically a chair out of hardware cloth, 1/8 inch hardware cloth, which basically supports the rock above the clay pipe or the clay pot. And so basically water will drain freely out of this and it'll wash the rock, which again, we used around our landscaping. Okay, so once you get the soil in, get everything level, get your seed bed prepared, and whatever you're doing, if you're doing seeds or you're doing transplants, just do it normally, just how you normally do things. You probably want to water your seeds and your transplants for a couple of weeks until they get established. And once they find that water down below at the root system, then they're basically going to water themselves. And since you're not doing any surface watering, your weed population on the surface is significantly reduced. The same concept for building these raised wicking beds can be applied to containers as well. I have publications on both of these. I published this back in when I had a time during COVID to publish this, but we've been doing this for about 14 years. We love these beds.
If you want to know more, I'll have a link in the description below to the publications that Steve was talking about on how to build these with a lot of specifics in there. And I hope you enjoyed it, and good luck with your raised self-watering beds. We love ours.